My advice to women who are going back to school or seeking education for the first time in a while would be that you can do it. You can absolutely do it. This education is more than just going to classes. It's an experience that's going to sculpt your whole life. And if you don't take the opportunity or you quit short of that, you're really not going to be able to know who you really are in the end. Education is a journey, and you should try to complete it in every way that you can, in like taking full advantages of the experiences that you have, experiences that you can take. Go out and seek those out and go do it.
All I can say is that there is a system that works for us. We just have to take advantage of that system. And if we don't know the answer, we need to ask the proper questions. And we need to be able to find the help that we need in order to accomplish what we want. We are not alone. We have support from counselors, from advisors, from other women that are willing to help, other women that have gone through it themselves, raising kids. I know that we just have to tell ourselves that we can do it.
For me, it's about changing the culture in my family, being raised in a family where the emphasis is so much on competitiveness in sports. I really want to change that culture in my family to really value education, to love learning, to love reading, and to just be so engaged in lifelong learning that can help us to be better at serving our people, serving our own community.
For more resources, visit uvu.edu/UWLP.
Growing up, I was taught that first I should be a mother and that was the most important thing that I should do, and that education was secondary, and that it was just as a backup plan for if something happened in my life or if something happened to my husband, I would have a way to take care of myself and the kids. I got married young and had kids young, early, and a lot of them. So when I got divorced, I had my 4 kids and I had an associate degree. So looking at my options of how I was going to take care of the 5 of us and find housing, I was looking at minimum wage jobs, which would barely cover childcare, let alone if I wanted to go back to school, I'd have to work a job and go to school and figure out how to pay childcare and rent and everything else. And so I was in a really tough position. I looked into several options of what would be flexible with my kids, because that was my #1 priority, was flexibility with my kids' schedule. So a friend of mine had suggested to me that I enter the pharmacy technician program at Dixie Technical College. And so I looked it up online and I saw what the tuition rates were and the timeline, and it was perfect for what I needed. So I applied and enrolled, and I started that process in September and then started class the 1st of January. After 6 months of the didactic portion of class sitting in the seat and then 180 hours of my externship, I was offered 2 jobs by separate pharmacies. We no longer qualify for Medicaid or government assistance, and we're also in the process of building a home with Habitat for Humanity. My kids are in the best position that they've ever been in. I get to be home with them as much as possible for a full-time working mom, but this job has been amazing, and it helps me, it reminds me every day of where I come from and what other people are going through, and what a big difference this tuition, the small price of tuition, can make in someone's life and completely change it for them.
Yeah. Welcome. It's good to have you here at UVU. Welcome to UVU. You made it through some traffic and parking, and you're here, and we're excited to have an evening with you. My name is Susan Madsen. I'm a professor of organizational leadership in the Woodbury School of Business here at Utah Valley University. And I'm the founder of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and we do 4 of these events each year, and just pleased to have you here joining us for this short keynote session and then off to some workshops that you've signed up for. So good to have you here. So this evening is called Unlock Your Potential, Strengths, Communication, and Networking. And just a reminder of what, for those of you that might be new, of what the Utah Women in Leadership Project does. And our mission is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women in whatever the way that means, to find their voices, to find confidence and step forward and lead, to get their educations, their college educations, hopefully here at UVU, right? And we run events and we do a lot of research as well, and offer resources as well. If you're interested in some of those, we have some information out at the table. Also want to thank, I don't know if my staff is in here, Robin's in the back, and Deirdre and Sharosky are here, and thank them for being here and their work. What? Oh, thanks. Oh, there she is. And also, we have a number of ambassadors to our project. And if you're an ambassador, can you stand? So I see who's here. Linda Macon is here. The Thompsons are back there. Sui Lang is here. Janae, Wendy, and I think I've got them all. Thank you for your service in that role. Also, our two premier sponsors this year are Squire and doTERRA, and we appreciate their funding to help us with food mainly. So you're getting food after, and some cameras. And the reason we film these is we have a lot of people in rural Utah that cannot come to these, and we like to make them accessible to people around the state. So it's important for us to have that funding. And then we also have some other sponsors, the Woodbury School of Business here at Utah Valley University, the Center for the Advancement of Leadership, the I cannot see too much in the back here, but the Women's Success Center and the Business Resource Center. There you go. I got them all. So let's thank all of our sponsors, premier sponsors, and thank you. And then make sure you join us on all these social media sites. We send out lots of announcements, not just for us, but we have lots, probably 100 collaborators or partners, and we send out their events on social media constantly. So actually, we're always planning our next event. We have 4 of these each year. And so Jane Clayson Johnson, if you know her, she was a well-known and still is internationally as a news reporter. And she will have a book released in January called Silent Souls Weeping. And you can see she's going to really talk about depression issues, but you see the subtitle, Emerging from Depression with Strength and Hope. So we want to understand depression. So I'm hoping that you'll join us because we all know and work with people that suffer from this, and maybe some of us here suffer from that as well. And for us, you know, and the research says that when we understand ourselves and understand depression, we can find our voices and confidence and lead in better ways. So I'm going to move now to letting you hear from our keynote speaker, which is President Astrid S. Jimenez. And Deirdre printed this big enough so I could read without my glasses tonight. So there you go. So Dr. Astrid S. Jimenez was appointed the 7th president of Utah Valley University in September, actually. She started in September of 2018 and is the institution's first female president. She brings to, oh yes, we like that. We like that. Yeah. She brings to UVU a broad and rich experience in academia, philanthropic activities, technology, and business. And she's going to talk a little bit about her background, so I will skip that part. Her pursuit of education eventually took her to the United States, to Brigham Young University, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree in international relations and Russian literature. And then she earned a master's degree from Harvard in Soviet studies and a PhD from MIT in political science. And before she assumed her position here at UVU, she was a world leader in the fields of technology and political science, most recently serving as an executive at Microsoft, where she led corporate, external, and legal affairs in Southeast Asia. She's also been a former vice dean of research and other things as well. We're so, don't want to take all her time reading her bio. I want to give her plenty of time. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry, I kind of cut that short.
I need the clicker. Yes. We need our technology. How are you? Yesterday was Halloween. It would be a lot funner if you all came in costume tonight. I was Edna from The Incredibles. Good evening, darlings. So thank you, Susan, for the gracious introduction. And if we can put up the PowerPoint. So I'll take just, I give a lot of speeches, and I think this audience is special. There are many young women here, older women, and I do think there is a lot of strength in women working together, moving forward, finding their voices, having confidence, doing what we have to do day in, day out. So I will introduce myself a little bit. This is the place where I grew up. This is my neighborhood. And I grew up in a house on stilts in the water in the Philippines, and there'd be high tide and low tide, and my siblings and I, there were 7 of us, 6 girls and 1 boy, and my father earned the equivalent of $50, not pesos, $50 a month. So it was quite the kind of existence where, you know, when you're small and you could fall into the water and drown on any given day, or when I was little, I actually had tuberculosis, germs, all sorts of things like that happen, and you learn at a very young age, or I learned at a very young age, to be a problem solver. There's a picture of me on the beach there. I had a plate of rice and I think a mango, and you know, I think this was taken during one of those church activities where we went to the beach. And I was a very staunch Catholic growing up, but at the age of 11, I joined the Church of Jesus Christ, the Mormon Church. I will say Mormon, sorry. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that was a big part of my life, actually. But this is sort of the background. And and what happened to me was basically nuns, Catholic nuns, gave me an education. That's really what changed the whole trajectory of my life. They were visiting the slums, and they found me and my siblings, and they said to my mother, "How many of these do you have? How many talkative girls do you have?" And my mother said, "I have quite a few." And they offered to let us go to their school, which was the second most expensive school in the city. They offered to let us go there for free. And then the journey from that education, and then, you know, getting into BYU, and then Harvard and MIT, that really was a very big part of you know, what brought me to UVU in April when I was selected as the 7th president. But I did return to Asia after living in Utah for 3 years, in Cambridge, Massachusetts for 7, in Russia for 2 years. I moved back to Asia, in New York City for 13 years. I moved back to Asia in 2005 and lived in Hong Kong for about 3 years, and then in Singapore for 10. And I returned to a very different kind of Asia, and I returned also as an educated person and as a professional, and sort of just saw this amazing Asia. You have the skylines here of Hong Kong and the skyline of Singapore, and I got to know I got to get reacquainted with a whole part of the world that changed so much and really had become the economic engine of the world. So I like to cite the statistics that from 2000 to 2010, nearly 54% of world GDP growth was created in the developing markets of Asia. And if you look at China alone, this is a country that has lifted people out of poverty, 400 million people. And it's true, they still don't earn very much money. I'm so sorry. That's why I really should have come in my Edna costume. I know, Jack, I apologize. So sort of this world of, you know, really crazy rich Asians in many ways, and not everybody is rich, but at the same time, seeing that growth, amazing growth, where the city-state that I lived in Singapore is just one little island, had a GDP per capita of $56,000, which is more than that of the United States, and they made that leap in 1 generation. So seeing that, while at the same time seeing all of these intractable problems that were still in Asia. And when I returned to Asia, after 13 years in Manhattan with a very New York kind of mentality and mindset, I was shocked by quite a few things. In a place like Singapore that I thought was so developed and sophisticated and amazing, people would just say stuff about women, and in Hong Kong, I also had kind of strange experiences. So in Hong Kong, there are hundreds of thousands of maids, and a lot of them are Filipinos or Indonesian. And for my first few months in Hong Kong, I was treated as a maid. And one time, my own building wouldn't let me in. And when I tried to meet with my husband in 5-star hotels, they all treated me as if I were a sex worker. And you know, I had a Korean friend who said to me, "That's no good, Astrid. Go get your Louis Vuitton purse as fast as you can. Hold it proudly. Don't smile at people, and just be proud and haughty, and you'll get the respect that that you deserve. But I really didn't think that was the right way to go. And when I was in Singapore, the president of Asia Society, that's an organization in New York, and I were thinking about this. How come women are viewed, as maids, sex workers, victims, or recipients of microfinance? And that was just kind of tiresome. And so that's how we hatched the idea of, studying women's leadership in Asia. And what happened was I actually published a report on women's leadership in Asia. And I want to mention a little bit of this to you, because I know you're focused on Utah, or you may be focused on the United States, but the problem is really the same everywhere. What we are finding is that even as women have made gains in education, in health, in entry into the workforce, at the end of the day, when you look at pyramids of leadership, where you have broad, selections of women coming into different industries, at the end of the day, as you move up that ladder, there are fewer and fewer women. And in Asia, I looked at this as, the dark side. There's a lot of growth and development, but this really is the dark side. And Asia was missing out on half of its human capital, half of its human talent. And so I wrote a report in 2012 that we launched in Shanghai. And I was making the argument that, you needed women in leadership positions, and there are 3 reasons for that. The first is just to fill the talent gap. You can look at surveys of corporations where they had job openings or they had leadership positions, and sometimes they can't fill 60% of these openings. And so to fill the talent gap, you need to move your women up the pipeline. A second reason was I feel that, in order to solve the intractable problems of deadly conflict, global warming, inequality, deep poverty that was still very true of the region, you need a diverse array of people to solve that problem. So you needed women, you needed voices of women. I was involved in peace negotiations in the southern Philippines between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and I looked at other peace negotiations. And there was one study that said, when women were involved, they're victims of war when it comes to negotiations. Not enough of them are involved. When you involve them, the peace agreements actually have a 1/3 higher chance of lasting longer. And so when you look at these problems, you need the diversity of viewpoints. And I have to say that there are differences in experiences and insight between men and women. Even when I look at my own career experience, I was on Wall Street for 4 years. I had my second baby there. It's a very different experience than what my male colleagues were having, and sometimes that's something that a lot of people didn't understand. And then finally, the third, and I felt the most important reason why Asians needed to be concerned about women's leadership in the same way that Utahns need to be concerned about women's leadership, is at the end of the day, what are the values that we espouse? What is the totality of a human life well lived? And when a girl has dreams, do we only say to that girl, you can only have one dream? And this is not to say that, it's not a zero-sum situation, but it is actually where we need to say that we need all talent, all dreams matter. What are the values really that we espouse? And if we do not have a more level playing field, then we are really saying things about what we believe in and what our values are and what our aspirations are. So that's the report. You could read it. It sort of took a life of its own. The other reason that I did this was that it's important to have the beginnings of a discourse. In Singapore, the wife of a very prominent minister said to me, "Why are you even doing this? Don't you believe that women should really just be quiet and lead from behind?" At first I thought she was joking, but then she wasn't joking. And so I know my jaws just kind of fell. If you do not have the discourse and the vocabulary, if you cannot articulate what that is, what is the problem if you can't articulate it and you don't look at the data? That's why I'm so grateful for the work Susan Madsen and her team are doing, because you need to begin with that. What is the story? What happened? Why are we where we are today? So I will just skip this slide. I've had, sort of all sorts of adventures all over Asia on women's leadership. And then I've come to UVU where I think we are at a nice inflection point here in higher education. You know, 70% of the students of Utah are now in institutions led by women. And I start with that Nipa hut to my education, to moving to the US, living in different countries, and knowing that there is a common set of problems, and then coming back to UVU because I believe that here and now in this institution and elsewhere in our families and our communities, we can make a difference. So there is a symbolism and many operational implications for the fact that, you know, higher education now has many women leaders. And I would like to really just end with a few lessons, and if you have any time, I'll take questions. So I've spoken to many different groups, and I get different types of questions. And young people often ask me, what are the lessons, you know, you've learned? And the first lesson that I have learned as a leader, and particularly as a woman, because again, this experience is kind of to me, it's gendered. It's gendered at the end of the day. The first thing that I've learned is wherever we are in life, whatever our age is, whatever our circumstances are, we need to remember that we have something very powerful up here, and that's the ability to dream and to imagine. What if, imagine a world where, what if your street had, you know, think about it. Dreams are free, and I say this in particular, I've given this message to many women who represent maybe the less privileged and less fortunate. I've done a lot of work with domestic helpers, with maids in Singapore and in Hong Kong. And the one thing that I've always said to them is, because they lead such abused lives, is that they had to see themselves as full human beings and that they should dare to dream. Because that's one thing my Nipa hut taught me. The roof would always have a lot of holes, and it was such a disadvantage because it would rain on us inside the hut. But then in the dry season, the same holes would make me see the stars and let me dream about things that I could aspire to be. No one can take that from you. Second, education is so important. So I'm not saying that as, you know, there's a throwaway sentence, education is so important. It's not even the act of really going to a university, getting your PhD. I think all of that can be very valuable. But at the end of the day, you know, are we learning? Are we honing our talents? Are we improving ourselves? And don't be afraid to be ambitious. I have a friend who recently visited UVU. She'd never really been to Utah, had no associations with this place. She's very, very wealthy. And she came here and she said to me, she said, you know, Astrid, one of the things that I puzzle about is why women don't have bigger ambitions, and that is true of education. If you think you have an aptitude for something, or you're learning that you're good at something, why not go all the way? Become a surgeon. Become, you know, make that dream and that education go as far as you can make it go. I was very lucky that the nuns found me and you know, brought me from illiteracy to being a literate child, and I love that. It really changed my whole world. Lesson 3, we all know Dr. Seuss. He was a very wise man, and in many ways. And try green eggs and ham. What do I mean by that? When I was 26 years old, I was offered a chance to move to Moscow and run a project for Harvard University. I had been married 3 years. 3 years. And my husband and I looked at one another, and we had made that pledge that we would support each other and our dreams throughout our lives. And that was a tough choice. And I made that choice and, you know, took the biggest job that I wasn't really qualified for and ran with it because, you know, green eggs and ham, you may think you won't like it, but you really, it will be good for you. And what happened there was I really, it set me up really for a lot of things down the road. It set me up. And my husband and I agreed we'd support each other. I would come back to New York every 6 weeks as my arrangement with Harvard. And it was before we had, you know, mobile phones. And my husband wrote me a handwritten letter every day that would take 2 months to arrive. And so, but sometimes you think, okay, that's not something that I want to do, or I can't do that, or I don't have the training for that. And I always tell women, you know, go for the biggest job you're not qualified for. Go for it. It will make you stretch. It will take you places. That's what it took me places, took me to the White House. That picture of the burning White House of Moscow, I was there during one of the biggest altercations, and I ended up being on the street doing some coverage for NPR. You know, it'll bring adventures to your life, and you only live once, so why not? So try green eggs and ham. I've tried quilting, by the way. For me, green eggs and ham is like things like sewing and quilting, because I don't do that. I have made one quilt, so I just want you to know that I have done it. And for those of you who are Latter-day Saints, you know, my Relief Society, they had to take pictures of me when I showed up and sat in front of the sewing machine. Anyway, lesson 4. We don't really go on this journey alone. I've mentioned my husband a few times because I believe he should be canonized. But before we got married, you know, he said to me, I want you to be responsible for your own happiness. And I thought, isn't that wrong? I thought I was going to marry you, and then, you know, you're going to rescue me from everything. And then we will just ride towards the sunset. And honestly, I didn't like what he said, but then I gave it a lot of thought, and I said to myself, he's going to be sorry he said that. Because by being responsible for my own happiness, I just pursued the things that I wanted to do. We were in graduate school together. And my husband he's the gentleman, he's the handsome man there in the middle, top row. You know, my husband was so great. On Saturdays, he would make a giant batch of lasagna, and he would make a giant pot of soup, and he would put it in consumable portions and freeze it all. And so, you know, by the 3rd month of marriage, we looked like lasagna because that's all we ate every single day. But, the gentleman to my husband's, where are you looking at? Okay, that's my thesis advisor, upper right, Don Blackmer. Frank Wisner, former ambassador to the Philippines, has gotten me so many great jobs. Professor Gary Browning from BYU, who is my mentor to this day. Dr. David Hamburg, he pioneered chimpanzee research with Jane Goodall and gave me my first big job in New York City. Dr. Kanwaljit Soin, the first orthopedic female surgeon of Singapore, a former refugee and migrant. These are people who love me, but will also tell me the truth about whatever it is that, you know, I don't get, or I'm just believing my own propaganda. They tell me the truth. So you don't do this journey alone. Put together your own personal board of directors. Who are those people who will love you and have your best interests at heart, but also tell you the truth, because it's important in our lives that we have people who tell us the truth. Is it good only for you, or is it also for the people? This phrase comes from a man named Salamat Hashim. He was the commander of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and I worked with his nephew, who started a plantation in the southern Philippines and employed guerrillas, kidnappers, etc., in order to bring peace, to end, you know, the conflict. And before he started this plantation, Salamat Hashim said to him, is it only for you, or is it also for the people? And I like this question because in leadership, you will have hard times. You will have many challenges. And women in particular, when we choose to become mothers, the challenges become even more complex. But if it is something larger than ourselves, we will be able to overcome those challenges. So we constantly have to ask, what am I in this for? Is this just about my ego? Is this just about, you know, crass materialism, or is this something about bigger? Is this about something bigger than myself? And this is my last slide. Replenish your strength, or why the sacred matters. The round picture that you see here, this is the picture of a car tire that I took in Bangkok. I was walking along the street, and I was trying to look at, you know, things. I was looking for beauty, and, you know, you don't think a car tire is especially beautiful, but I took this picture, and I looked at it, and I thought, it is beautiful. And it became such a metaphor for, you know, in the day in and day out, and there's a picture of my family there, and then me wakeboarding in Deepwater Bay in Hong Kong. What are the things that refill your cup? How do you find the sacred in your own life? How do you honor your quiet moments so that you have time to care for yourself? Leadership is not sustainable without the maturity and ability and the courage to have self-care. And so it's really important that we nurture that side of things, because again, it is about something bigger than ourselves. And to sustain that, we do hard things. We have to find joy in what we do, purpose and joy. And I find that, you know, my own family, they are a reality check. My toughest customers are my 3 children, because frankly, I have zero credibility. And you know, I can't do it top down because they're always questioning me, but that is part of life. And they bring me a lot of joy and a lot of laughter. And I had, you know, I had my 3rd child at that phase in life when my cohorts were becoming grandmothers. I mean, yeah, so, and then I felt like, oh, I just got a little puppy that makes me laugh again. So find your, he may not, he's 9 years old now, and he may object to the puppy characterization. So this is, I mean, you know, my comments are sort of a little bit all over the place, but I hope that I've captured for you what in my own journey has been meaningful. I know that it's difficult to generalize, but I hope that by telling you a little bit about my story and some of the things that I have learned, that you can look at your own journey and where you are, whether you're 10 years old or 75 years old, that we as women in particular, we have a lot to give. There is so much that we know from our own experiences could be valuable to the world that we are creating, and this world needs us every single day. Thank you.
And I'm going to tell you where to go in just a second, but I'm giving her a gift, and it happens to be my first book. Now listen to the title. On Becoming a Woman Leader, Learning, I can't read it. Learning from the Experiences of University Presidents. So I actually interviewed women university presidents across the United States, so you'll enjoy that, hopefully.
This is perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. So you have, it's wonderful again to have you here, but we have 3 workshops, and we're going to get you to those workshops. So the first one, actually, the one that's the second on this list back here that I'm looking at, asking for what you want. If you're in that workshop, you go out the door, turn left. Actually, everybody goes out the door, turns left. But if you're in that middle workshop, don't go up the stairs. Just go past the stairs and you'll see where to enter on center stage. So the other 2, you'll go out the door, turn left, up the stairs. And the young women, the one for strengths on young women, after you get up the stairs, you'll turn right. There'll be people up there to direct you. And if you're in the one on networking, you'll go out the door, over there, up the stairs, and left. So people will direct you. Thanks so much for being here, and go straight to those workshops.